everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Rise Up, Voices from the Frontlines. My name is Krista Fee, and I am your host. And today we are going to have a deep dive conversation about peer support, groundbreaking research in relationships, and what we can do on every level, from social to administrative to peer-to-peer, to bring the quality of life and reduce post-traumatic stress and suicide and addiction and divorce in our military and first responder families. So please welcome Joe Rizzuti to the show. Hi, Joe.
Thanks for having me. Just a couple of things. I do have a thick Boston accent, and the camera does gain 50 to 70 pounds. So I just want to let your audience know that. But thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And thanks for all the work that you guys are doing.
I love that you are so knowledgeable in so many different aspects of the conversations that we have. So this conversation can go in so many amazing directions. I'm guessing we'll probably have you back more than once to go into other aspects that we can't hit on today. But I love to let our audience know a little bit about the people that I bring on. So let's start at the beginning, which is always a great place to start. Who was Little Joe? What was your like?
Yeah, I actually, it's funny that you said that, because I actually wrote a book that I give away called A Cop Story because of my growing up. I grew up in the city of Revere, Massachusetts, which is a very colorful, it could be a sitcom, a beautiful little city on the coast of Massachusetts, right next to Boston. Italian, Irish, and Jewish. Organized crime was prevalent in the 60s and 70s. My family was deep in service. My grandfather worked for the DPW. My uncle, who's like a mentor to mine, was a firefighter. His family were all firefighters. So I kind of grew up in the firefighting service. I grew up around a firehouse. My stepdad was in the Army, and I followed his footsteps there. My biological dad was a two-bit wise guy. It was something like out of the Sopranos. And I grew up with a learning disability, and I overcame that. And it's you don't overcame it, you just challenge it every day. And I had a dream. I wanted to be I always wanted to go into the fire service, and I realized I don't do heights very well.
Oh, no.
And those guys work really hard. I know, not that us cops don't, but I'll take the fast cars and the guns compared to the chainsaw on a roof that it's burning. Those guys are amazing. They're my heroes. If any cop says that they're not, they're lying to you, because deep down inside, they're amazing people. And so I grew up in the city of Revere, and what happened early on, I had with the learning disability, I was a problem child in school. Back in the 70s, they didn't have all these great tools. They put us in a room with behavioral issues, and I had these great teachers. I had a husband and wife team, Mr. Maleko and Christine Race, and another guy named Jack Karen. And something snapped. It hit on something. A switch went on in my brain my senior year. I was in this class. It was a reading class, and Jack McCarron was a World War II veteran. I was definitely going into the military. He was a very strict man, which was not the typical teacher that I liked, but I had a lot of respect for him. He brought this gentleman in that looked like he was homeless, and he ended up being an undercover Massachusetts state trooper. And it was just a switch. I wanted that job. But with the learning disability, I spelled cat with a K. I had a lot of ground to make up because I wasn't paying attention in school. I had a dad at the time was working full-time for the National Guard as a recruiter. I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and I think my father needed to make his quota, and he steered me toward the National Guard, which was a great opportunity. I went into the Guard, and I joined to be an MP. My father thought it was the funniest thing in the world because I hated authority. They kicked my butt. they it was the best thing I ever did. I joined a unit that was downtown Boston, was filled with police officers, city cops. They took me under their wings. I was the youngest. Went to work full time for the National Guard. I was the youngest National Guard recruiter in history. I made a lot of milestones in the Guard, and what happened was that eventually I got lucky and got a high score and was able to. I got called for the fire service, Mass State Police, but Revere at the time was. I always wanted to be a Revere cop. There was just something. I used to see these guys do choir practice, and I'll get into that a little later. And I was able to obtain my dream, uh, and I did it for about 20 years until it was cut short due to an accident. Um, but in the meantime, somewhere along that way, I had a bunch of traumatic incidents, and we're very fortunate to have the Boston Police. I still refer to as the stress unit. Um, that was really the groundbreaking for this whole movement that's going on through this country. It's been around for 40 years. Ed Donovan, who's still alive, his son is Mike Donovan, the famous comedian. Um, we had them in our backyard. So we didn't have, back in the day, the Mitchell model and all this stuff was just coming about. Um, so I was lucky to get support through the stress unit, fell in love with the work. Because of a couple of traumas, I was sent up to this farm that just started called the On-Site Academy, and it's the nation's premier facility for post-traumatic stress and addiction at the time. It was these two amazing angels that go on to become my segregate parents, I call them, Dr. Hayden Duggan and his wife Valerie. Um, and they basically saved my life. And what it is they're based off the Mitchell model. It's a beautiful place up in the western part of Massachusetts. I go up there and to deal with some of the traumas. I never left, and when I retired, I was fortunate enough to become a LADAC, a drug and alcohol counselor, because I just don't want to do the clinical hours that you people have to do on the mental health side, and they make it so hard. It's just not fair. There's so many people that would get into this business to help people, but the academics making it so tough for people to get into the field. And I think they're jealous of the peer support people that are doing the amazing work. But OnSite's got a beautiful alliance of the clinical people that are like yourself that are culturally competent um, and just I was volunteering up there when I retired, and finally he said, "No, you got to come work up here." And I went and got my LADAC, and now I'm on staff there. I work. I am blessed to have an opportunity which is so unique. I work with a phenomenal partner, Jay McKeon. She works up at NEPBA, and she works with me up at. I work with her up at OnSite. NEBPA is the New England Police Benevolent Association. They're based here in New England, and I help them with their wellness along with Jane. And I'm also with the Fraternal Order of Police. So they allowed me to work with, which is kind of unique because they both do collective bargaining work, but I don't get involved with that politics. They're allowing me to reach as many police officers and first responders as we can. And I got to give credit to Jerry Flynn from the NEBPA and Tom Greenhall over at the FOP. Tom is another mentor for the FOP, and he does a lot of work with both of us for allowing me to be able to be part of two great organizations. And Sherry Martin too, and who's the director at the FOP. So that's a little bit about my story. And along in there, I go. I am in recovery. I got 11 years under my belt, and that's something unfortunately that's goes hand in hand with our business. I work strictly with first responders and their families right now, and yeah, I get a great life, and I'm giving back, and I love it.
It's extraordinarily rewarding work, and it almost, for people who spend their lives serving others in different capacities, whether that's, serving in the military, serving as a police officer, serving as a firefighter, it's almost a natural progression. There has to be a plan B for when you're going to retire, or you're going to get hurt, or you're going to med out, so there's there is gotta be a plan B. And continuing to be able to help others, continuing to be able to follow that passion and that purpose it keeps retirement from being a danger zone. It keeps retirement from being a terrible thing. So few people like retirement.
Yeah, it's you're spot on. And I do a lot of work, and we're going to be doing more work on retirement. It's something that we're really pushing. Um, you need a purpose in retirement, right? But especially for first responders, I got hurt, and you go from 100 miles an hour to zero. You go into that danger zone where you pick up the substance, or what happens is you're looking for an alternative to replace that. And I'll just share with your audience is that we hear this all the time. Um, the job is addicting. The job is. I'm going to put it right out. It's the closest thing to sex as you can have is to get into that cruiser or that fire truck, and when those tones go off, or that hot job comes in, and your community knows what I'm talking about. They're all probably smiling because there is nothing like that. The chemicals that go off in your brain, and for those of us who are fortunate to do it at the level that I did it, and work in the type of environment that I did, when that's gone, I actually goes. I the story is I go up to on-site when I had to retire from my identity, um, because my boss was so worried about me. I've been a cop since I was a kid. I wore a uniform, um, and I had to reinvent myself, and it was to work at on-site, and I ended up opening a hot dog cart, something crazy, and it was successful. But I was doing counseling on the side of the road, and it's a true story, and and it this allows me to be in the police stations, the fire stations, and to work with first responders, and still live vicariously, through them. And you got to have, like you said, that plan B. I love what you said. It med out. I never heard that term before. Med out. Uh, in Mario Oliveira, who's a legendary police officer that was shot up here, he runs the violently injured officers group, and we've talked about this a lot. Our first responders get a raw deal in a lot of states where um, it's not an accident that we get hurt. We're assaulted. We get hurt on the job, and we take a financial hit when we retire. And then, don't get me wrong, the money's good in retirement, but my earning capability, like here in Massachusetts, and I know the NEPPA is going to be working on some of the legislation, but it's going to be national. Why do we get penalized? When I left the police department, I no longer get the raises. I'm no longer entitled to overtime. I'm capped at what I can make. I didn't ask to go out. And our heroes that get shot, I got run over, and I broke my knee, and I can't do the job anymore. But I think we get a raw deal because our first responders give so much, and we get penalized for doing our jobs. And I know the FOP on the national side, and I know the NEBP is also looking to change these. And I know Mario is doing some great work because you know somebody asked me the other day, when's the best time to start thinking about retirement? I says the day you get on the job, because God rest her soul, we just had a 19-year-old police officer that was a member of the NEPPA get killed up in Rutland, Vermont. 2 days on the job, she sacrificed herself, this hero, and took out a bad guy. And she was 2 days out of the academy. So I mean, yeah, you got to start today when you get on the job, because you don't know, God forbid, when it's going to happen, and you don't want to leave. And we don't talk about the financial piece enough in first responder world. Um, that I see. I had a kid. I call him a kid. I call everybody a kid. I call everybody a kid. It's funny. I had this officer pull up, and he had a beautiful F-250 pickup, brand new on the job. I said, "What's that payment?" He says, $1,200.
Oh
I
my
says,
gosh.
$1,200. I go, why don't you take that money and put it towards? I know houses are expensive, but buy a junk box. Use that for your work car, and buy a piece of property. Um, and I think that's a place that we all have to start thinking about with our young first responders, because the job does pay well in our place, our jobs. But yeah, so that's pretty much some of the areas that I like to see us go into down the road, and as we go forward in mental health, there's areas that we can do to help our officers, and one of them I think is the financial and retirement piece.
Right. I love I love to challenge people on this conversation because there's a lot of organizations out there, and I work with a nonprofit coach to help us speak about what we do in the best possible way. And he's really angling, he really wants us to say mental wellness for first responders. And I said, that is not what I'm talking about. What I want to talk about, what I want to change this conversation to is I want to stop talking about mental illness, mental wellness. I want to talk about lifestyle wellness. I want to talk about it
Yeah.
being more than just the job. I want to talk about it being a whole person, whole life set of trainings that start before hire and go all the way through retirement. And we normalize that we talk about this stuff. We normalize that we talk about finances. We normalize that we talk about relationships. We normalize this idea that we're talking about coping strategies and stress reduction, and it doesn't have to be about illness or being broken or being, we're so reactive in this particular, like, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder all the time. Like, that's what people are familiar with, suicide and post-traumatic stress disorder. But we're talking about the hundreds of thousands of moments that happen before that.
Yeah,
Right?
the cumulative stress that goes on every day that our people are so resilient. They are resilient. It's just that the way they mitigate, everybody mitigates stress different, right? And let's face it, when you take these jobs, it's going to be a stressful job. It's
Right.
also the way you perceive it. If you listen to the negative Nellies in your roll call rooms and your fire stations, not so much the fire stations. The fire service does a better job than us. Um, you got to have that positive attitude. I used to drive my cops crazy because um, I love the job. I had this young cop one time complain. He said, "Where did you work prior coming here?" And he said, "Staples." I said, "Why don't you go back there? Because you know what? If you don't like this job that's giving you a great listen, they pay me a lot of money to drive a brand new police car really fast, to shoot guns, to to drink a lot of coffee, which I just gave up, and to talk to some amazing people. Um, we always talk about the negative calls in the job, and I just recently discussed this. We got to start thinking about the good calls. People go, well, there's no good calls. There's a ton of good calls. You just got to know how to look at them. And you got to get out of the cruiser. These agencies that don't teach their officers it's okay to get out of that car and talk to the public, engage the public. The only way we're going to beat that false narrative that was put forth by and I don't want to get involved in politics, but that false narrative by that the group, I'm not even going to mention their names, um, that labeled all our police officers as murderers. It's just the farthest thing from the truth. You know, the first line of defense for civil rights is our police officers. Who's enforcing civil rights laws? It's the patrol officer. I've done it. And, you know, the job can be an amazing job. It's just the way the leadership needs to reframe it. That's all it is. And if we reframe it that, try to make this job a little bit pleasurable instead of miserable. And that comes from leadership. We can cut down a lot of the stress that's out there. And I believe that 100%. I really do.
I still think the foundation of police work is relationship and communication. And those are the most important skills that any officer can have is de-escalation. People like to talk about that, and really all that is relationship and communication. If you actually are taught how to talk and how to listen all the time, if it's a normal conversation, that's really helpful. And like you said, you don't have to stay in the car. The job is to be the bridge for the community. Like, you're there to have relationship with the community, and staying in the car keeps you apart, keeps you other. And exposure and uh, exposure and comfort come from connection.
Yeah, some of the best police officers are deputies and SEOs. because the COs, the corrections officers, and our deputies that work the jails, they don't have the guns on the side of their belt. They don't have the tools. They have the verbal skills. And I think what helped me was I was a recruiter for the National Guard, so my salesmanship skills, and that makes me a better counselor too. We're able to maneuver people. I mean, I wasn't the perfect cop by any means, um, but I see the skill set that our deputies and our corrections officers, when they work the road, they do a beautiful job at de-escalation because that's what they're taught. They have to. It's a survival skill. Um, Listen, we spend a ton of money on useless stuff in the academy. You know, um, some of the training that I got there, I just shake my head. And when I think about it, I was talking to Karen Solomon from First Help, who's another great organization that's doing phenomenal work. They're based here in Massachusetts, another first for us up here. And I said, our biggest issue is the chiefs out here spend more money on challenge coins and T-shirts than they do on officer wellness. It's insane. Or the other stupid thing that they're doing now is I'm a big fan and is wellness visits. We do it in my practice. We do it in my practice. Wellness visits, but they have the officer use insurance. When you use insurance, you got to put a label. You got to come up with a diagnosis.
There has to be diagnostics.
It's sad because so they will. It's cheaper to if contract with a culturally competent team, and now there's no labels. Now because God forbid that officer's called into court and they pull his records, and they're going to say, well, you went to this therapist and it says the lowest diagnosis, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think is like adjustment disorder. I don't take insurance. And I'm like, why would you do some to that to somebody? Yeah, it's great you're giving them a day off, but then they get to search for these therapists that don't know what they're doing. And I'm going to be very honest with you. There's a lot of them that just want to get paid. And, instead of just spending a little bit of money and getting the quality that's out there, and start putting a label on our offices. It's another pet peeve of me. And I see that a lot lately. Oh, we're doing the right thing, mental health. No, you're not. You're doing it to cover, to pat yourself on the back. But what are we actually doing for our offices when we set up a wellness program? Are we doing it to make the chief feel good, or we're doing it actually to build morale and to take care of the members? So you can see, I'm quite passionate about this, and it's something I.
Oh, that conversation I'm also hugely passionate about. I think there's a huge gap in knowledge. I think what is happening is there's this idea that a licensed certified therapist is the go-to for everything. And a therapist is for diagnosis, prescription, and when there's actually a mental health illness, right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need a licensed therapist for lifestyle wellness. So if you're looking for coping strategies to handle stress, if you're looking for someone who can listen to you about your relationship struggles, if you're looking for someone who can give you some financial advice, you don't need a therapist. So you don't need a diagnosis, and you don't need all of those negative things that go along with that, where your peers think that you are, not able to have their back anymore, or that you're now a liability. There is not. We're forgetting that there's an entire spectrum of service providers that come before that could be extraordinarily effective. And this is your peer support and your coaches and your consultants, and you've got a ton of different people that can be vetted, but are not. They don't come with the same negative side effects at that level of care.
Yeah, and my biggest pet peeve is the culturally competent. You hear me use that term a lot, and it's awful hard to break into this field, right? It's awful hard. Everybody thinks they're going to make millions of dollars helping first responders. We feel good, and they graduate and they get their masters, and they want to put their shingle up, and they want to dictate to a guy like myself or my other peers that have been doing this since '96, because I had a professor in college. She had a doctorate, brilliant person, and she looked down at me and she questioned me about the work that I did. She thought I was lying. about who I knew and where I was and what I did. And I, needless to say, had a long conversation with her afterwards. And I'm like, you need the alliance. There's an alliance between the clinical world and the first responder world, and we do it beautifully at onsite, but they need to be culturally competent. What I mean was, you got to leave your ego at the door. Our therapists, that are civilian therapists, we have a lot of them that are like myself that will go on after being a first responder and become, in the clinical world, and get some sort of license. But you need the alliance because they bring so much to the table. But these clinicians that we work with, they're not about the money. They have great practices. They volunteer. At 2 in the morning, I'm going to tell you right now, my partner, the ones I work with, they're out on a CISM team volunteering their time. I know how some of these blowhards that work at these facilities that want to get on a podcast and tell you how great they are, that will shut their phones off and they will not show up at a call or a debriefing or a defusing. And they don't have any empathy or sympathy for our officers. They're there to write a book, or make a name for themselves. And I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback, on this, but I'm telling you, what works and what we see work are these beautiful individuals that are out there like yourself, that understand our culture and that give their time, and we don't have enough of them. And the other question is, how do you get involved? How do you get to be culturally competent? And we tell them, you volunteer. You start out volunteering. And there is a difference. Like, the other big push now, that's going on throughout the country, is we've got the CIT clinicians, the ones that work out in the community. They're doing great work, like responding to mental health calls, but they don't, and they should never be doing the work of peer support or officer wellness. They can't cross that line. And a lot of agencies are making the mistake of using them. They have no experience of working with police or firefighters, like corrections officers. So to get the experience, you need to volunteer, I think, first, and work at facilities that work with first responders and get a little bit of credibility. Um, because there's a lot of people that are doing more harm than they are good right now in that world. And I'll say that's enough for me on that, because I know I'm going to get pushback. But it is what it is.
I say that all the time. It's no big deal. I've actually thought I've attacked therapists a number of times. I don't mean to attack therapists in general, but because I see first responders every day, I get all the stories of, I tried going to therapy and this is what happened. I tried going to therapy and my therapist cried. I tried going to therapy and my therapist looked at me with big, huge doe eyes and said, "How could you?" Or like these different things that happen. And I'm like, well, that's malpractice. I'm like, you said you were able to take first responders. And if you can't sit there and listen to the story of the 2-year-old that was scraped off of the road, if you can't handle that, that's not the work for you. Don't see first responders. If you're not if you're not prepared and capable of maintaining your composure under any circumstances. And those circumstances can be someone admitting guilt for something horrific. They can be, the horrific details of a scene that they've been to. Whatever it is, you've got to be able to just be okay. My face cannot change no matter what you say, because the slightest disapproval and that guilt and shame that this person is feeling is going to be confirmed. And I can't help someone heal from guilt and shame if I'm confirming that they ought to feel that way with my body, with my facial.
You're spot on. You're spot on. You're spot on. And you're talking my language. But we do have a lot of great. I don't want people to think there's so many great clinical people out there that are doing amazing work. Colonel Dave Grossman is one that comes to mind. Kevin Gilmartin, Dr. Duggan that I work with, and Valerie up at his wife up at Onsite, my partner Jane and Tommy and Linda Repose. I could name them, but the difference with them is they take the time to ride in the cruiser. Right. They respond to the call. They do stuff for nothing for our people. and they get great practices. I mean, a lot of these civilian clinicians that we work with, they're very successful in their own right, but they're just the most beautiful, empathetic people and giving back. So we have to, and I got to give. This is where I give Sherry Martin credit at the FOP level. She's got a vetting guide that anybody can get if they go to the FOP website, and we vet our clinicians. If like when you call us, we have clinicians that will get you in right away that we work with that are culturally competent. That do take insurance because at some point in time you have to take it, right? Because you have to do a diagnosis, but they understand the culture. And I've probably got 12, not, probably five, I would say five good ones that I use that specialize in different arenas. Like Tracy Parsons up in this neck of the woods. She's one of our go tos for relationships. And she understands our people. We've got specialized clinicians that are first responder friendly, and they just didn't happen overnight. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? So, but anyways, good
Right.
stuff.
It takes, just ask the questions. When you go to see someone, you are hiring them. Like, you have the right as an individual to ask them questions and choose if they are the right person for you. You don't have to see whoever you get sent to first. So think of it as a job interview, and you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and ask them what their background is. Ask them why they work with first responders.
Yeah,
Ask them how many first responders they've seen and what are the outcomes, what are their success rates. It's okay to advocate for yourself. that is
if
that
if
is
anything,
not
if
a bad
any if anything this podcast does today, it opens up the discussion for somebody that's maybe looking for a therapist. And I applaud you for doing that because we need to have our people go to the right person because they do no more harm than good. Um, I wouldn't have got to the, I wouldn't have come up with the hypothesis in the work that I am doing now on relationships if it wasn't for a civilian therapist that I work with, right? My partner Jane, and she spent years working with first responders in relationships, and what she brought to the table and set off a lot of red flags that I seen in my studies on police suicide, and we're able to come up with this hypothesis on relationships and how they relate to police suicide that we had written and taken down to the conference. I took down to the conference down in Nashville. We ran it by a bunch of people. Then we ran it by the VA, and I ran it by First Help. And we're able to develop a relationship group now where we work. And this is all stuff that we see that she brought to the table because she spent years working on first responders and their marriages and their relationships. I come in from my world at this peer support, and I'm going, yeah, I see this, I see that. Oh my God, this is we got a profile here. You guys call it hypothesis, we call it a profile. I'm a big fan of John Douglas and the guys from the behavioral science unit. But so, and we're able to now put this uh, profile out there, and we're able to see now um, if we see these traits in somebody, that I guarantee you're going to see a past childhood trauma. You're gonna see the lack of sleep. You're gonna see the infidelity. You're gonna see the financial issues. You're gonna see the substance abuse. And guess what? You're gonna go along with that. You're gonna see either a suicide attempt, a suicidal ideology. I always have a hard time with that word. Um, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. That was the alliance between a, a, a culturally competent uh, therapist that worked with first responders and a lunatic like me that is passionate about this. And now all of a sudden we're actually putting the plan into action. And I got to give you my boss credit, Dr. Duggan. Instead of like the clinical world, they want to research everything. They want to get a grant and research because they want the money for the research, right? My boss is just the opposite. He was awesome. He's like, you got something, now come up with a plan and let's attack it and come up with a relationship group. And we have, and we're the only ones that I know that are doing that type of work. And it's been groundbreaking, the people that we're helping, because we're getting them to talk about the death of their animal, right? Listen, uh, when animals and first responders go hand in hand. When one of my bulldogs died, I ended up in the hospital. I was having a heart attack. Why? because they're unconditional love. At 2 o'clock in the morning, when I come off a shift and everybody's sleeping, and there's a bottle of Tito's there, and there's my bulldog, and I want to cry about the dead kid, I'm crying to my bulldog. I'm crying to my animal. And when they pass, it's traumatic. But in our studies, we're finding that animals and first responders go hand in hand, and you got to talk about that relationship with the animal. And it's been groundbreaking, and I'm so happy I'm involved in that type of the research and the work that we're doing.
That's awesome. That's totally awesome. I love that. I've been buried in a research project on the connection between childhood adverse experiences and the choice to go into a first responder profession, that inclination to choose to help others. So that's my brain has been wrapped around the, like, everyone I talk to has the same story. So what is this? And the research that exists is not really wanting to completely link those adverse childhood experiences to necessarily to our adult choices. There's a lot of vague language and a lot of, well, this might be associated, but as a academic world, we're refusing to take a stand and go, okay, look, there is a connection here. There is something here. How can we use this for risk assessment and for creating knowledge base for our new first responders to go, I already have these childhood adverse experiences. I'm already at risk for post-traumatic stress. How can I mitigate this knowing my weaknesses as I go in? And I hate to use the word weaknesses, maybe vulnerabilities or predispositions is better. But knowing the risks and knowing that we know how to mitigate it with all of these different tools and resources, how can we give them the tools to say, I might be a little more at risk than my partner or my buddy here. I'm going to take this more seriously, and I'm going to do these things that mitigate my stress and that keep me mentally healthy from the very beginning and the outset of my career, so that I don't end up with these negative outcomes. So that's the work that I'm like super passionate about right now.
Oh, you're talking my language. Listen, I fully disclose I was assaulted as a kid, and one of the studies I disclosed it at 45 years old up at onsite, and we had the work that they did was some of the research. You might want to talk to Valerie on that. Is that we know that it's proven that uh, people who have had the ACEs or the childhood traumas, they come into this profession. It's We see it every week. And I came into this profession, and I realize now because I had somebody rescue me, and we see those heroes that they're our saviors. We want to go in there and help somebody because somebody helped us. We come in that profession. I really believe that. So that's something that is absolutely positively there's something there. Again, how would you know this unless you talk to first responders and you have an open mind? You
Right.
know, you're not going to get this type of conversation at Doc in the Box or some of the higher academic places. Listen, we've got some of the best mental health facilities in the world that still refuse to hire a peer support person that because I don't know if they're afraid of having that peer on staff because they're a threat. Um, but you need the alliance, and there's absolutely something about first responders who had the child the screwed up childhood or the abuse that will come they come into this profession. I honestly believe it, and they make some of the best first responders. But you're right, they become vulnerable, and that's the hypothesis that we see is that we self medicate because when we get the cumulative trauma, because society has taught us to self-medicate, the professions taught us it's okay after the we drink all through the academy. It's
Right.
okay.
It's part of the culture.
Yeah, it's part of the culture. But God forbid you use a CBD product, right? That actually is going to help somebody. I'm a harm reduction guy. When's the last time I ever had a fight with somebody that was, and I'm not advocating for THC by any means, but on CBD, I look at this distorted sense of what works and what doesn't work. I mean, let's face it. You could tell a cop all day long they got to work out and eat healthy. It ain't gonna happen to 40% of us because 2 in the morning when you've worked 10 hours and the only thing that's open up here is, Dunkin' Donuts or 7-Eleven, and, and you're drinking a gallon of coffee, which I'll get into in a minute about the caffeine addiction, um, it ain't going to happen. So what do? You were taught it's okay to drink, but we never talked about the side effects of drinking called alcoholism and what it does to us and what it does to our culture. So, yeah, these are conversations that we got to start having about the relationships, and we got to we got to finally start having the conversation that, not everybody's an alcoholic, but we have to make people aware that if you're going to self medicate over a trauma, put the jug down, go see a therapist, go get help. It's simple as that.
Right? Knowing, recognizing for yourself the difference between I'm having a drink and I'm coping.
Yeah, it's that sucker drink, right? The first drink, we know it's a stimulant. It's the first drink, you're going to feel good. That we call it the sucker drink. But we know now, because of the neuroscience, your second and third drink become a depressant. And what are you doing? You're chasing to try to find that first drink. You're trying to find that high. That's exactly what's going on in our mind. But we don't realize what we're doing is we're putting that poison, it becomes a depressant. And then we go down the rabbit hole. Listen, the studies show what is it 96% of the police suicides involved with alcohol and a firearm. You take out those equations, and I think that study came from the VA. I'm not, I know I heard it. It's either the VA or First Help. When you take those things out of the equation, you get a 70% survivability rate in suicide. You know, and I applaud the work that Karen did with getting that federal bill that's out there. As long as I guess the way the bill reads is that if the first responder has sought help, there's a survivor benefit now for suicide, and that's the work that first responders did to get that bill, and their families. So it's good stuff that's happening.
Yep. So you work a lot on relationships.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about first responder marriages.
Well, it's I work as a team on that. The whole concept that we work at onsite. It's something that we see all the time. We started a relationship group based on the work that me and my partner did, Jane. But actually, the work was being done by Valerie and Hayden up at onsite for years. We just kind of enhanced it. We see almost, I, if I had a thumbnail sketch on statistics, it's close to 80% of our first responders that will come up and that will talk about relationships or they that had a relationship in the past but didn't know how to talk about it, either being a past childhood relationship or a marriage issue, or the marital issue becomes because of the childhood issue that's got fired up over the trauma that's not being treated right. Um, you know, I think at one point in time on my own job, we had on my shift, we had like an 86% divorce rate or infidelity rate, and nobody wants to talk about that. Okay, but it's real. It's real and it's happening. So and I talked a little bit. Colonel Dave Grossman's got a book out that he was awesome that he autographed for me. It's called the Bulletproof Marriage. I'll give it a plug because he's done some great research in this stuff too. So what we're seeing is it's common sense, right? You're going to change. You know, you go from a civilian, you go into this crazy world of first responder world, and all of a sudden you're not your needs have changed at home, right? You're seeing all this horrific stuff. Um, you're not communicating. You communicate more with you're spending more time with your brothers and sisters. I had talked to an agency yesterday. They do 16 hours in a cruiser. So if you're doing 16 hours with your partner in a cruiser, how much time are you spending home with your wife and kids? And what's that look like? What's that marriage look like? And so what happens is you reach out to somebody that's showing you that attention that you're not getting home. But before you know it, you get the guilt because you're doing it, and you go down that rabbit hole where that guilt becomes, the alcoholism. You're spending the money, and before you know it, you're thinking about there's no way out, and there is a way out. There's a lot of ways out, and sometimes the marriage is done. Right? Sometimes um, the marriage changes because of the job, and that person that you married is not a good fit for your profession. We have to be honest about that. But for the most part, when you reach out to somebody on an infidelity, it's usually because of what's happening in your past or on the job. So we have to talk about it because it's happening all the time. And it's costing people's marriages. It's costing families to be split apart. It's also causing alcoholism, and it's causing suicide in the end. Um, like I said, it's not all. You're going to change. There's no doubt in my mind. I don't. Unless you've been married for 5 or 6 years prior, the job, it will change the dynamics of what's going on at home if you let it. And that's the key, if you let it. So the work that we're doing up there is we're identifying the stuff, and we're seeing more of it, and people are getting help, and we're saving marriages. And these therapists that I talk about, they're saving marriages and they're saving families. And it's amazing work that they're doing because they understand the culture of the world of being a first responder. And if anybody says it doesn't change you, they need to go find another profession. Um, you know,
No, interestingly, the an observation that I've made in my practice is the best the best marriages with first responders seem to be marriages where both parties are first responders. And if you dig into that, why might that be? You have to go, okay, well, they understand each other's culture. They understand each other's language.
yeah,
They feel safe telling each other their experiences and sharing their burdens of their day. So there's all of these elements of how do you make an how do you make a civilian first responder marriage have those same qualities? How do you build that trust that a first responder feels safe sharing their experiences and their emotions the way that they would feel safe if their wife was a nurse or an EMT or whatever it is? But how do we bring spouses that are civilians onto the same being a part of the family, being a member of that culture? We have to include them. We have to start bringing them into the experiences of the job. We have to let them, it has to be embedded into the culture at work to some extent.
spot on. And Kevin, I know Dr. Gamont talked about this a long time ago. Boston PD, having the conversation early on, pre-employment, is huge. Having a culturally competent marriage therapist on speed dial is important. Um, the communication skills. I give an example, and one quick tool is, I'll tell people, and I used to get in trouble with this all the time. Like, I would come off a shift, and if my significant other wanted me to go to a function, I did not. I had no business being at that function because I haven't de-escalated for 24 hours. And when you go there with people that don't understand your business, and I always get this, well, you would jump and run for another first responder, or you have no problem being at a first responder function because they understand me. When you take me, even today, like going to a family function with a bunch of people that don't understand me, I've been retired 11 years. My skin crawls because the questions that they ask, and I just want to just like hide in a corner, leave me alone. Um, and who do we gravitate in those barbecues and birthday parties and weddings? It's the other first responder. You might not even like the guy or girl, but guess what? It's true. You're going to gravitate them because we feel safe. And one thing, if your audience does have a member, um, you give them space to de-escalate before you ask them to go to a family function. Give them time just to relax, a good, even 10 hours, just to before you put them in a position where they're going to feel uncomfortable. Because let's face it, we are comfortable with our peers, and we change. Our lives are going to change. But anyways, I know we're getting short on time, so stop babbling.
No, it's all very valuable information. I love this conversation. And I think I think it's great for people to hear the differences. Because I think people don't necessarily, if you're not in it, you don't know. If you're not in it, you just see these people that act, standoffish and tense, and That's the person at the party that's standing with their back in the corner and is watching everybody.
Or
And
carrying the gun, right? Why are
yeah,
you gonna take that gun into my barbecue?
right. So
Uh-huh.
what's wrong with that dude? Why is he so uptight? Why is he so stressed out? Why doesn't he like me? That's the other. Why doesn't he like me? So it's good to have these conversations. I think part of our job here with these podcasts is to help humanize the uniform, to help remind people that the person that is in this role is just that, is still a person, and there's thoughts, feelings, emotions, dreams, a family, obligations, stresses, and imperfections, and we need to accept that. We can't continue looking at first responders as more than human or less than human, and that's the cultural tendency, is one or the other extreme, and it's very important to just go, that is still a man, that is still a woman, and they have the same needs that I do. So how can I allow them to have those needs and still wear that uniform?
Yeah, yeah. It's so important, especially now where we're losing so many people out of this profession. People are retiring, aging out, and people are coming on the job and leaving because they don't, especially on the police side. Our numbers are so down right now, and it's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous. We're asking officers to do 16-hour shifts, which is, it's insane. The lack of sleep is worse than being on cocaine and heroin. And then, like me, I got caught up in caffeine addiction. We're drinking tons of coffee, which is a stimulant, and we're doing damage to our bodies. I see these young kids pounding down these monster energy drinks to stay awake. And then we discipline them when they want to take 5 minutes behind the police station to get a little sleep. We want to suspend them, and I think it's absolutely stupid. We're investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in our people that are doing amazing work, and in the leadership um, has no empathy or sympathy or don't education of what is actually going on in the field. Um, and I think that's a conversation that needs to be take place now before we lose the profession. You know.
I'm hearing some people are having 48-hour shifts, 48-hour shifts, and then 4 days off.
Well, on the fire service, that's prevalent. But we're seeing now on the PD side, it's very common. We're talking without even being forced. This is collectively bargained into their contract that they're doing 16-hour shifts. A lot of them do it because they like it because they get to have the time off to work. Up here, we call them details or overtime. You know, we're well compensated in Massachusetts for our work, but the truth of the matter is, you know, when do you sleep? It's the Ferguson effect. When you look at somebody's eyes and you can tell that they're making a mistake, a tragic, deadly mistake. I would ask is, on a lot of these use of force issues that are going south, well, when's the last time the guy slept? When's the last time he talked to a mental health professional for a check in? You know what I'm saying? When you put your officer, or you see an officer working, the 16 hours, how effective can they be? Our firefighters get to stand down, right? Our firefighters train during the day, but they get to stand down. I'm not saying that we're paying guys to sleep in a job, but we have to be more cautious. Hey, listen, here's my pet peeve. If you're forcing the patrol division to work 16 hours and you got people on 5 and 2 on admin schedule that go home and don't work weekends, get their butts out of their desks and make them fill in these shifts. If you got command staff that isn't pulling a shift to alleviate some of the stress that's on patrol, you're not an effective leader. I came out of the military where we're taught that your troops eat first, not you.
Right.
Anyways,
Servant leadership is long lost.
I don't know what they teach at that FBI academy or what they're teaching on officer wellness down there, but it seems like when these people come out of that school down there, they try to reinvent the wheel, and it's common sense. Take care of your people. Take care of your people.
Absolutely. So before we go,
Yes.
how can people find out more about the organization that you serve? And
It's very simple. I serve a lot of organizations. I'll just put my phone number out there because My phone doesn't stop, and that's we don't have an off switch being first responders. We're never going to have an off switch. You're not going to tell us about boundaries, all the psychobabble stuff that we learn in college from these psychologists. It doesn't throw it out the window over us because our first responders. I'm going to end up probably dying on with my phone in my hand, helping the first responder, and that's the way I want to die. So
Oh,
nice,
that's a whole nother conversation on
yeah,
that. The
nice,
differences in what it looks like between clinical
yeah.
therapy and what first responder work looks like.
Oh, absolutely. It's
On
you.
call 24/7, you're available in between sessions.
No boundaries.
The power differential. You're
Yeah.
you're not a doctor and a patient. You are equals. You avoid the clinical environment as much as possible. It's better to have sessions with a fishing pole in your hand.
Yeah.
But
Dunkin' Yeah. So
it's
anyway,
a whole different world.
978-408-5279, 978-408-5279. You can get me on Facebook. I'm out there. And like I said, if there's anything that I can help you, if your agency's looking for resources, I'm tapped in throughout the country. I have a brother-in-law who's a LA County firefighter. So I'm well tapped in throughout the country, different agencies. I'd be more than glad if you're having a bad day and you just want to talk. That's what we do. So thank you for having me. I'm looking forward. You guys are doing great work. This conversation is awesome. You're spot on, and it's nice to talk to somebody that understands spot on what we're doing. So I applaud you.
Thank you so much. We'll stay in touch, and
Absolutely.
we'll probably do some more episodes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today for this episode of Rise Up Voices from the Frontlines. I will connect you. I will put the links down below so you can reach Joe and so that you can reach Battle to Be if you are looking to support our organization or you're looking for resources. If you want to support this podcast, you can go to battle2be.org, BATTLE2BE.org. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't wait to see you next week.